I don't even really know where to begin, so I will just begin, I guess. Yeah, I want this channel and the videos I make on this channel to be very real. I don't want to put on any sort of face, any sort of get up, any sort of mask to hide um, who I am and what I've been learning and what I have to say. So today will probably fulfill that. Today will probably be very real. Also, just before I really get started, I do apologize if the volume levels are either really quiet or sound somewhat robotic. Um, this microphone I'm learning is not the highest quality, so um, in order to get the audio to sound good, I've been turning my input way down, turning my gain way down. So I hope you can forgive me for that. Also, right now where I'm sitting, there are mosquitoes everywhere. So I will probably have to, you know, swat them away like that. I hope that you'd forgive me for that too. So I started my new job this week, and it was quite the shock for me going from college student, less than 2 or 3 weeks ago to full-time employee. I drove to work. I got there 5 minutes early. I came inside, and my manager is bringing me into where I'm gonna sit, and we step into the room, and it's this big room full of cubicles. Pretty much all I can hear are people typing away on their keyboards. No one's really talking. The walls are gray. The floor is gray. The cubicles themselves are gray. And there are no windows. And that was quite the shock for me, because I don't think anyone, if they were to envision, oh, what is my dream job? Or where would I do my dream job? Even if it is some sort of office-based job that they're working. I don't think anyone would envision that yeah, that's where I want to work. But nonetheless, that was my situation. I set down my stuff in the cube that they showed me to, and they were like, we want you to get started right away on your training modules. So I spent the first 3 days doing pretty much nothing other than watching videos and clicking through training modules in a gray room with gray floors and no windows. I don't know if I've ever felt more like a mouse in a cage or a cog in the machine than I have in the past few days. So that experience that I had on Monday and the experience I've been having the past week, if you've been reading between the lines, watching my other two videos, especially the first video, you'd probably pick up that this latest disappointment, let's call it, even though it's short-lived, has only been added on top of other hardships that I've been experiencing in my life. And yeah, it's not fun at all. It's been very easy for me to think that not only has my college experience not been exactly what I wanted it to be, but the end of my college experience certainly isn't what I wanted it to be. And now my first job out of college can't be what I want it to be. My life now is just going to continue to be disappointing. And I say that right now as if it's easy to say, but being real and honest, those thoughts have been absolutely pervasive. And there have been many moments where I have been just completely broken down because of those thoughts, thinking that my life is set for recurring disappointment. And that has been my lot, and that will continue to be my lot. Completely devoid of any good thing that has happened. I can only focus on the negative a lot of the times. But what I wanted to talk about today is the book of Job. The book of Job has been a place that I've been continuously going to the past 3 months. Not because it's an easy book, but because it's obvious that it's one of the books of the Bible that is so real and so connected to how I'm feeling right now. So it just felt like the natural place to turn. So what I wanted to do today is, in light of how often I've been there recently, I wanted to just give a recap of the book and kind of my takeaways as I've been reading it, and to summarize it for you all. And maybe, I don't know if I can provide applications or not, but the book starts off with the character named Job, and it tells us how good he is, how righteous he is. He loves God, he has a great family, he has a great life, lots of possessions, all of these really good things. Job is exactly the type of guy that all of us want to be. So then after we get done hearing about Job, we're taken to heaven, and God is there, and angels are there. And then Satan shows up. Don't ask me the theology behind Satan being in heaven. I don't know exactly how that works post-fall. Don't ask me about that. But Satan is there, and he says to God, look at Job. And God's like, yeah, Job, super faithful. Satan goes, look at Job. I bet that if you took everything away from him, that he wouldn't praise you like he does now. Satan says the only reason he praises you is because you've given him such a great life. And God says, all right, Satan, fine. Like, do you want to prove that you're right? I'll give you the chance to prove that you're right. I give you permission to ruin Job's great life. And we'll see if he still praises me then. So Satan does exactly that. He destroys Job's livelihood, kills his flocks of animals. He kills Job's sons and daughters, which is horrible. And not only that, he gives Job a sort of rash sickness from his head to his feet. And the only thing he can do to temporarily relieve this rash is to scrape himself with broken pottery. So Job goes from this man who has a great life, great family, great job, great possessions, and great faith, overnight to someone with no job, no possessions, no family besides his wife, and a body-ravaging illness. But the question is, does he still have his faith? Job's friends hear about what happened to Job, and they show up. And they see the desperation his life is now in, and they do nothing but weep and sit in silence for 7 days with Job, which is one of the first important takeaways is that in response to suffering in our lives and hardships in our lives, that it's okay and even right to feel. Our first response can be feeling the pain, and that's okay. I know it's easy for me to think that I need to toughen up, move on, figure it out myself, but all those things are wrong. It's right for me to feel. It's right for you to feel. And you're not supposed to figure it out by yourself. You're supposed to let God in. So eventually, once the 7 days are up, Job's friends start talking to him, and basically they say things like, Job, we've been thinking, and you lived such a good life, but now you're living such a terrible life. It must be that this is happening to you because God is punishing you. You must have done something terrible, and because of that, God is punishing you. And they tell him that for a long time, amongst other things. And Job responds when they say that by saying, how dare you say this to me? There's no way this happened because I sinned. He says, I bet I could go, if I could go and find God right now and talk to him, I would be able to lay my case out before him, and I would be able to justify that this didn't happen to me because I sinned. Job tells his friends this, and then he starts talking to God, and he says, God, I'm angry. Why is this happening to me? It's not because I sinned. It's not because I certainly asked for this. He goes, God, I've done everything right. Why did you let this happen to me? And that's kind of the second point I want to take from this story is not only was Job allowed to feel his pain, he's allowed to be mad at God. And he's allowed to ask God the question, why did you do this to me? Or not why did you do this to me? Why did you let this happen to me? Because Satan is the one who brought the pain. And Job is never called out for being angry at God. That's never counted as sin against him. In fact, what is called sin is what his friends say to him when they say, you must have sinned, this is why this is happening. Or, Job, cheer up. You just need to get over this. That is called sin by God in the book of Job, but not Job's actions of being angry or questioning. So that's really important to remember. We get to the end of the book, and eventually Job gets to talk to God about his problems. And Job once again asks God the question, why did you do this to me? It doesn't make sense to me. Why did you do this to me? And it's so incredible and also so infuriating what God's response to Job is. God says, Job, let me ask you a question. Where were you when I created the earth? Where were you when I set it on its tilt, when I contained the oceans with the land? Where were you when I placed the stars in the sky? Where were you, Job? Where were you when I created the fish and the animals and the birds? Where were you, Job? And obviously Job was nowhere when that happened, but that's not the point. God's point is, Job, do you really think that you could understand my ways? Job, do you really think that if you were where I am, in God's place of maintaining and controlling everything, Job, do you think you could do a good job at that? The obvious answer is no. And the third thing I want to take away from this book is Job didn't get his question answered the way that we as humans would expect it to be answered, but God pointed him to something with his response. God basically said, instead of looking around at your circumstances and what part you played in this, whether good or bad, he says, look up. Look up at me. It's certainly a tendency of ours that when we are going through something hard, the only thing we can do is focus on the hard thing. Either because we want to decide a way to fix it, or because we've become so obsessive with our pain that we just can't help but think about it, or maybe we want other people to see us in our pain. Whatever it may be, just our thoughts are consumed by our circumstances. That's been true in my life. But God says, look up. Look at me. He says, I am in control of everything. I am in control of the earth and the sky and the waters and all of space and, all of creation. And I'm in control of your life too. God says, this happened because I let it, and that doesn't keep me from being good. When troubles hit our lives, God wants us to turn to him. That can be like an easy thing to say, but it can be an entirely different thing to do. In the midst of my struggles the past few months, I have been trying so hard to do this, to turn to God, to look up, to see his goodness and his power, and try to discern any sort of good that is coming from my pain. And I haven't been feeling what I would expect to feel. I haven't been feeling a warmth. I haven't been feeling a sudden joy. I haven't been feeling like everything's okay. But something that I've been learning recently is that really nothing with God is dependent upon what I do. Nothing really is dependent on what I do. I can't try hard enough to feel better. I can't try hard enough to get my mind in the right place. I can't try hard enough to understand God's motives in allowing bad things to happen. In the same way that I can't try hard enough to earn my way back into right standing with him. Like it took God moving to me to send Jesus to die and rise again for salvation to come to me. It took him choosing me for that to happen. And in the same way, I can't try hard enough to force what I would force in my life right now. Like, if I could force things in my life right now, I would force my problems to go away and I would force my emotions to feel good all the time. But I can't do that. God is saying, there is no 3-step plan to fix your problem right now. None certainly that you would understand, even if I told you. God says, what I want from you is I want you to understand that I am enough. He doesn't even say, I want you to feel that I'm enough. He says, I want you to understand that I'm enough. Understand that I am with you, even when you feel like you can't force it or you can't feel it. like such a deep knowing in my soul that in turn leads to a steadfastness, that in turn leads to a purpose. When I got done with my drive from work today, I pulled in behind my house, parked my car, turned the engine off, and sat and bawled my eyes out for a good 10 or 15 minutes. Like I said, there have been many moments where I've broken down recently, but the reason I broke down this time was different. I was listening to a sermon as I was driving back, and the sermon was just getting done, and the pastor who was speaking, right as I was pulling into behind my house, said, "I want you to know that the story of the Bible is God with us. That Jesus is near. And not only is he near, but he sees you. He sees you in your pain. He sees you in your anxiety. He sees you in the pit and says, I want that one." He doesn't love some future version of you. He loves you right the way you are and when you're at your worst. And hearing that broke me. Because I could feel myself, I could feel my heart getting hard to God. Thinking that, well, if I don't feel better by now, then maybe you're not even there. Like, because this is happening to me, and because it's been so hard, and because I'm faced with loss of people in my life, and facing a job that maybe isn't what I expected it to be, and all these things, it's been easy for me to think that maybe I'm the exception. Maybe Jesus has abandoned me. And I could feel my heart being tempted to turn that way, and hearing the words, Jesus sees you. It hit me, and I knew that I wanted to talk about this after that happened. Sitting in the driver's seat of my car, bawling my eyes out, thinking about not only what I had just heard, but what I had just heard in connection to all of my pain, all of the loss that I've been feeling, all of the confusion that I've been feeling, all of the shame and guilt that I've been feeling, all of the disappointment I've been feeling. Thinking about those things and thinking about Jesus sees you. God knew when he allowed Satan to destroy Job's life that in the end, Job would still praise him anyway. And I am not as righteous as Job. Certainly not. But I know that when God allowed these hard things to happen to me, he knew that I would still turn to him. And he sees me and he chooses me, not because that's true, but because he loves me because of who I am. exactly the way I am right now. And yes, he's using this pain to transform me more into the person he wants me to be. He doesn't want me to stay broken or to stay in sin or anything like that, but he still loves me exactly where I am. And he sees me and he smiles. I may never understand why my past 3 months have been the way that they've been. The end of my college career went wildly different than I had hoped. And the life that I was planning to live got swept out from underneath of me. And I've had to say goodbye to people that I dearly loved. In the midst of me not understanding, in the midst of my pain, in the midst of Job losing his children and his family and his entire livelihood, God is in control. And he sees me when I am sitting in my car and can do nothing but weep. I don't have practical applications based on this book or my personal experience. The only thing I can say is God is in control and he is good. And if those two things are true, I do not have to fear that my lot in life is continual disappointment. I don't have to try so hard to do more for him. That he loves me because I'm me in a way that no one else ever could. So I hope that something I said ministers to you today. I hope that if you're watching this and you have a connection to my life or my recent struggles, I want you to hear the voice of a man who is not okay, but knows the one who holds him up. And I want you to hear the voice of someone who is committed to using my testimony to live the life that God has intended for me. And I hope you would do the same. I hope that maybe for the first time you would turn to God and you would say, God, I trust that you're in control and I trust that you're good. And that the ultimate display of that was when Jesus died on the cross 2,000 years ago to stand in place of where I should have been. And God, I can't tell the future, but I trust you. And I trust that you will be there for me when no one else is. When my career isn't there for me. When my expectations let me down. And that will always be true. So I realize I'm rambling. I've said the same thing over and over and over again. But I hope that something I said spoke to you today. And I hope that you and I would go through this together and that God would be glorified because of it. So with that, um, have a great rest of your day, rest of your evening, and we'll see what I decide to talk about next time. So, bye.